just a little introduction and just a little insight into what it's like working in an open system national park, in the pulses of nature, and I'm going to talk specifically about fires and floods. So if this is the picture you've got of a park ranger and all the things that rangers do, and we've spoken a lot about in the session about tourism, about all these wonderful feelings that we have when we go to national parks and how we rejuvenate, I'm going to try and shift your baseline a little bit. Right, so let's just have a quick look of where we are in the Garden Route National Park, specifically in wilderness. We've got an open access national park. We've got very complex and porous boundaries. We've got a wide variety of landowners and land managers. We've got developments on floodplains. So you can see here, there's the towns of Sedgefield and Wilderness on development on low-lying properties, prone to flooding. And we can see threaded amongst all that, there's fynbos vegetation, prone to fire, and all sorts of things going on there. A lot of people come here, people want to live here, that's beautiful, it's a wonderful way of life, and all these wonderful things that we feel when we stand on the deck. I've been watching people, they think, oh, this is great, and there's this wonderful feeling of relaxation. But there's trouble brewing. Not even Jackie Chan or Chuck Norris can sort out. There's a recipe for disaster busy brewing, continues to brew, has brewed, it's just going to get worse. We've got this especially after COVID, we've found a lot more people moving to the garden route. People who used to have family homes or holiday homes are now living here permanently. The number is in George, between 50 and 60 families per month are moving just to George alone every month. So people are growing, people want to be here. We're seeing an increase in property value. The property values have shot up. 6 years ago, you couldn't even give away some plots in the Rondaflow area for a 6-pack of beers. They're going for 2 million rand at the moment. It's absolutely nuts. We're seeing more pressure in the development applications we get, high value, high density property developments, sort of in this cloak of eco-resort, trying to fool us here in the garden route, that they're having this eco-resort and we're all friendly and stuff. Meanwhile, it's just about maximum profits. We've got a bit of weather bingo happening at the moment as well. So any given day, you're not too sure, are we going to have floods or are we going to have fires? We're looking in the long term, the scenario, we're looking at about 2.5 degrees Celsius increase in the next 20 to 30 years in the garden route. Some of our baselines are shifting there. We're looking at increasing storms and flooding events. That's busy happening. Loss of land due to sea level rise, wildfire disasters, and prolonged droughts. And this is not unique to the garden route. This is not unique to South Africa, and certainly not unique around the world. This is something that is happening. We've got this sea level rise, coastal storms, more people going down to the coast. It can only end badly. But at the same time, with all these people moving here and all these developments, there's a massive pressure on the ecological infrastructure. As rangers, we are constantly dealing with people removing reeds for views, riverine vegetation. The pressure just goes on and on and on. So what is our capacity here? It's very vulnerable. So going to a national park makes you feel good, makes you relax, and it's all this great sort of stuff. But living in a national park also conjures up, or next to a national park, but you're going to conjures up fears and anxiety. I've actually, and this is no joke, I've actually received phone calls from doctors in town, just down here, of asking us when are we going to be mechanically opening the Swartflow, because they're having patients coming with this anxiety. So this is quite an interesting thing that we've got to deal with. So we have people going to national parks wanting to have a meaningful experience in a national park about the trails and the interpretations and all this kind of stuff, but at the same time we're dealing with this fear and anxiety. These are scenes from the 2018 fire. So also, there's smoke in the air, there's still this anxiety in the community. So we're having to deal with that as park management and as rangers in the field. Let's just touch on quickly in our governance context. So it's very complex in South Africa. The environmental laws are just multi-layered and integrated and sometimes confusing and sometimes working against each other. And it's a very confusing environment. We've got these layers of local municipalities, district municipalities, provincial government, national government. It's a very, very confusing space to work in, particularly in an open access national park where we have to look in the buffer zones. We have to look outside what's happening outside. We can't just sit in our lager in the little valley here in the estuary. We've got to have an influence on what's happening around us. And then there's our internal governance processes. So this here is what a section ranger and a park manager's desk looks like. There is no embellishment. We spend a lot of time with our internal governance processes. And more, we are spending time in the disaster management arena. So we're spending quite a lot of time in being ready for these fires, being ready for these floods. We're communicating around it. We're trying to involve people. There's massive pressures on our budgets. Steph spoke about park managers under incredible pressure and SANParks to produce its income. Because we don't get these grants to construct new fire breaks, buy all this machinery. This money's got to come from somewhere. So as rangers, we're spending a lot of time constructing fire breaks, watching weather, and there's a lot of pressure from SANParks. There's a lot of pressure, like SANParks, you need to stop the floods. You need to stop the fires. There's this sort of denial of living in a national park like this, that floods and fires are part of the landscape. And if you want to live here, you need to somehow adapt to that. And it's a very, very tricky space to work in. 5 years ago, we were maybe spending 50,000 Rand per annum on fire breaks. We're spending close to the region now, about 220,000 Rand per annum. Our fire breaks have gotten wider, longer, and we've had to increase them. We had to start spending money on fire trucks, millions. And we spend a lot of money doing preparation on preparation channels for our mechanical breaching procedures. We've refined them. We started to bring in the local community, sponsoring weather stations, assisting us with data monitoring and data analysis. But a lot of these systems tend to be focused on readiness and preventive. And there's also, it starts creating a little bit of complacency. So we did a lot of communication about all our structures and systems in place. But there is a growing amount of people, just checking my time, 7.5 minutes, we're good, the preparation channel is in place. SANParks has got this under control, we're not going to flood. Oh, we've got fire breaks in place. Oh, we're fine, we're going to be fine. So it's created this whole sense of complacency. The disaster management systems tend to be very focused on being ready and actually being reactive and responsive to a disaster. And it's a very rigid and structured process. So we got thinking about we need to do something different here. We're stuck in the cycle of waiting for a disaster to happen. What are the things that we can, at park level, can start doing, and at ranger level, start looking at doing things differently? So this is now bringing the social ecological systems thinking right down to the ground level. Because it was, when we were first introduced to all these principles, it was these, and we've seen the graphs, lots of interconnected and structures and learning and stuff, and thinking, how on earth are we going to do this? This is impossible. This is something that someone else must do up there. But as we started spending more time in the space, learning a bit more about the theory of social ecological systems thinking, we focused on a couple of things here. So essentially, we've got this commons dilemma. So we're favoring the individual property rights over the collective rights. So that was an overwhelming thing that we were dealing with. Individual property owner buys, he's got rights, and he wants to develop those rights, with little disregard to the collective health of the system. And we didn't have any meaningful contribution to collaborative ecological infrastructure. So we now know that it is under pressure, we've got to build resilience, we've got to look at this adaptive capacity and resilience of the system around us. But can we do this alone? We had to start creating these collaborative learning networks. And not in big structured systems, very informal, about your colleagues in the Knysna municipality, the colleagues from the provincial, the colleagues from SANROL, the national road agencies. Then we also looked and applied the sort of polycentric approach. How can we create these little nodes on a section ranger, park manager level to interact with our colleagues? And how can we use this to influence our governance that is giving us all sorts of headaches? So it was about just trying to create these little nodes that were all interacted to look at disaster management, not just now from a responsive and reactive sort of point of view. How do we start building this resilience and adaptation so that our ecosystems are a bit more robust to handle all these things that we know are coming? Because floods and fires, it's not a if it's going to happen. Maybe it's going to happen. It's just a case of when it's going to happen. We need to be ready for that on a bit more of a proactive approach. So this is just something that's sort of evolved over the last 3 to 4 years of just how, at a ranger level, we've been able to take this, but potentially on a big scale, we can just bring it down to something that's very functional for us. Oopsie. So if we look at our key problem, and this is just one of the nodes I'm going to focus on, invasive alien plants. So we need to manage that. This is now specifically looking outside the park in the buffer zone. We've got all our sort of ratepayers association, conservancies, FMUs, individuals. And then just above that, we've got our rangers operating in the space, the municipal officers, province, we've got our fire protection associations, and then we've got our colleagues from the national office. So we've created this network amongst ourselves here, and underpinned in that has been a lot of learning by doing, but in a very informal, agile, spontaneous way, that we made all these connections around this problem of invasive alien plants. So there's a lot of things that are going on here, a lot of communication, and we're feeding back to our reporting structures. And the whole idea was to start having this bottom-up approach, that how can residents, rangers on very junior management levels start influencing decisions up here. So what has worked was, so what's actually happened here now, so we have these national officers that come down and they're reporting to their directors, and there's all these kind of things happening. What we found was there were some municipal policies that were not quite, the governance system was preventing a lot of private landowners actually taking action and clearing land clearing aliens on their properties. We've got it now that the national director who's responsible for the enforcement of the regulations are now meeting with the municipal directors to see if we can change things over here that makes our governance system, in which we need to operate on this level, a whole lot easier, so that we can see change down here. We've also had something here with SANROL, so the roads agency. They also have property here. We've been dealing with their lawyers. It's just the system that SANROL wants to work with. SANROL, through these interactions on this level here, are now changing some of their lease agreements that they have with their landowners to bring in environmental management as a standard clause in lease agreements. So by doing this bottom-up approach, we've had on a very localized level some impact on our governance systems to make life a little bit easier for us here addressing invasive alien plants. So what have we gained out of this? So about a month ago, we had a visit. We can actually see the compliance in the landscape. We can see property owners. So we've had these blitzers. So those are 3 or 4 organizations meeting there, addressing things around alien plants and private land, public encroachment into coastal public property, and issuing notices and just having this sort of real integrated approach to addressing some of these things. So we can actually see in the landscape where property owners have been clearing. We've had close onto, over 3 years, 120 visits to different properties, and we can see the difference. We can actually see it busy happening. We've got this collaborative problem solving. So on our localized level, we are making prioritization decisions within our frameworks, which we are allowed to make decisions, and we're making these things work together. And we've got this agility to address issues that pop up, because we've got these strong relations with the province, municipality, national government. It's a little WhatsApp group and a quick Zoom call that can quickly sort a problem out, because these things pop up very quickly. Because of our collective strength, we are now in a position to support our conservancies, all these other NGOs that are important role players in the... this is now working with also our local community, putting up weather stations to help with early warning. The data is available for free. Okay, on 15 minutes. We've also rolled this down, right down to our field rangers, where this sort of collaborative, spontaneous learning goes into our rescue situations. Here's rangers participating with the university, doing fish surveys, law enforcement operations, helping out in the laboratory. So we've taken this approach of this collaborative learning and yeah, just this being really underpinned by learning through participation. Okay, so last slide here, we've seen some positive results. The whole thing remains fragile. I think that came out of the earlier session, and it's remained on. The problem is you take a couple of key individuals out of the system, the whole thing can collapse. And we can actually scale this thing down. It doesn't have to be this big project with multiple layers and all that. We can take fundamental principles out of this, and it works. The challenge is to entrench this approach into the culture of doing business in an open access park. So yes, we can't Kruger National Park and anti-rhino poaching operations. That's not a fit. But in open access parks, where we've got all these things, this is an important way of how we need to entrench this business on how to do it, and that's the challenge. It takes a fine balance between managing your operational governance system, because at the end of the day, you remain a ranger, you've got a team of rangers, you've got law enforcement, you've got all these other opportunities. But you've got to make the time to maintain these relationships that you're creating, because they are rewarding. At the end of the day, it's about teamwork. And yeah, this is just, I wanted this to just sort of represent the fragile nature. It could just take one storm, 2 or 3 people resigning, and your defenses that you built up through your teamwork could just collapse. But it's a whole process. Yeah, and I think that's me. Thank you.